So it's, we can start then?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Well, it's a little after 2:30. So it's appropriate for me to get a phone call. Well, I'd like to call the meeting to order, and as required by rules that I'm sure Rob put in place, we'll have an attendance call, roll call. Please, Yolanda.
The name in here. John Blackshire,
Here.
Ray Kavanaugh,
Ray.
Sarah Phillip, here. Kevin Obert,
Here.
Bernie Weekend,
Here. And so we have enough to have a quorum in a meeting, so that's great. Are there any agenda adjustments that you're aware of, Yolanda? I am not. All right, great. The next item on the agenda is the call to the audience, and there looks like there's somebody that would like to speak, so I'm required to read this. During this portion of the meeting, the audit committee chair or vice chair will maintain order by setting appropriate limitations. The following procedures related to the call to the audience portion of the audit committee meetings will be observed. All public comments for the meeting were accepted either in person or written form. Public comments will be read into the record by the committee chair or vice chair. Individuals attending the meeting in person and or addressing the audit committee via written comments should observe rules of propriety and good conduct and refrain from impertinent or slanderous remarks. TUSD serves students of all ages, so speakers should be aware that children may be present. The executive assistant of financial services will ensure each committee member receives a copy. At the conclusion of the call to the audience, the audit committee chair or vice chair will ask if individual committee members wish to respond to criticism made by those who have addressed the committee, wish to ask the staff to review a matter, or wish to ask that a matter be put on a future agenda. By law, at most, 2 committee members can address any single issue raised during the call to the audience. The contents of this card are public information. And it seems as though we've received 2 requests to speak. And the first we received was from Sylvia Kempley, correct?
Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure to be back with you. I wish that I was before you with wonderful things to say about TUSD. I am not. And I'm very distressed. Every time I go to the grocery store, drugstore, doesn't matter where I go. I was at a very large meeting last night at Catalina. People come up to me. And while I think educators are not hysterical people, certainly most TUSD administrators are not hysterical people. People are crying, reporting things to me. I have never seen the climate as it is right now. And again, let me remind you, I've been involved in TUSD business for between 40 and 50 years. Last night at a meeting, I heard that 3 board members asked to have an agenda item put on a board agenda. That board agenda really belongs to the board. Somehow, I'm told, the superintendent has not done that. He has blocked it. That's problematic. And I thought the audit committee should know about that. I'm also here just to follow what this group is going to do about the EDI audit and what they are going to do about auditing the auditor, because it's insane. And if there's somehow that you can stop that train, I recommend that you stop that train. The last thing you want to do is run the auditor out of town. That's happened with many administrators already, and it does not need to happen with the only independent administrator in TUSD. Thirdly, I got a list of items that allege that a governing board member has violated one conflict of interest issue after another. I realize that the auditor and this committee can do nothing about it, but you certainly should stay on top of that issue, because as things go to the board from this committee, perhaps that board member should not be voting on items from this audit committee. Last and not least, well, I think there's two more items. The budget. You've heard from Lillian Fox about the very, very difficult time that she's had in getting a copy of the budget book, something the board should have had on their desk before they voted on it. The board still doesn't have it. Lillian doesn't have it, and I tried getting it. And let me tell you something. It's a phenomenal task. TUSD has less students today than it had when I was on the board. The budget is much less than it was back then. Yet the book is larger, not with more details, not with more transparency, but you have to follow it all over the place. It is not user-friendly. It is not transparent. And I believe, Mr. Ross, I believe that it's in violation of the unitary status plan, because it should be posted intact and it should be user-friendly. I'm just urging this committee, because really it's the only committee that community members can come to at this point and have any amount of confidence that anything will happen. On that note, in my communications to this committee, I don't think they should be sent anywhere else. They should be confidential and they should come directly to this committee. Thank you very much.
Any member have any comment?
Who's the board member that has a conflict of interest and what is it?
No, well, this is a committee. That's the board.
Yeah, but she mentioned a governing board member had a conflict of interest. Like, who is it and what's the conflict?
I believe it's Robbie, whose family member or was involved with a company that has a contract with TUSD. Is that a correct statement, Rob?
I'm just going to remind you of the things that the law allows you to do in response to a call to the audience, the three things that you read at the beginning.
Okay. Any other comments by any board member? All right, thank you. I believe we have one other request, and that's from Lillian Fox. Thank you. Oh,
Okay,
thank you.
I'm here to talk about the 2025 budget book. This graph is from the budget book. This shows what TUSD gives to vendors for the utilities. This is the TEP bill, the water bill, all their utility bills. All it is utility bills, nothing else. And it shows that in 2025, they have skyrocketed. This makes no sense whatsoever. I have talked to people who know what this is. What I'm telling you is the truth. This is a problem. Now, next page, I'm going to go through this real quick. This is what an approved budget book looks like. It has the committee, the audit, the board members' names on it, lots of other people, CFO's name on it. This is TUSD's budget book for this year. It shows it was adopted on July 15th. It was never adopted. The document didn't exist. It's never been voted on by the board. The only name in here is Dr. Trujillo. No board members' names anywhere because they haven't even been able to open it yet. Now, next page is the issues with the budget book. I have been able to download the whole thing. You divide it into 7 parts and you can only divide it in certain ways and you download each one separately. Anybody who goes in there has a hell of a time downloading it because you have to know how big each section is. And the sections aren't numbered. So when you try to download a section, if it's too big or you try to download too much, it tells you you'll get something in 3 hours and nothing shows up. So without a roadmap, it's near impossible. There's a lot of gibberish in it. If you look at the red stuff down here, the word Medicare appears 6,779 times in the K-8 school section alone. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes over and over and over again. It's not clear what the heck it is. Same deal when you look at the middle school section, which is a much smaller section. Medicare only appears 1,597 times. There's some good stuff in here, but there's a lot of stuff that's just garbage. That's why it's so big. Now, you don't need to turn to it, but the last 2 pages of this little packet show you examples of the gibberish that you get. This is just a chart about the trouble TUSD is in. You don't need to look at that right now. You can look at that another time. This is a chart from the budget book. It shows you that departments are now getting 56.5% of the money. The schools are only getting 43.5% of the money. Our schools, we have schools that haven't had a school nurse in 4 years. And I'm talking about not even 1 day. Because last year, a lot of schools had a nurse 1 day a week, which is not enough. I think some of you got a table and intended to include, and I didn't, that shows you the revenue TUSD has. TUSD has plenty of revenue and the schools are being cut. This is the gibberish I was talking about. Am I done? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for the information. Again, anybody have any comments, questions under the rules that we must operate under? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Four point oh one, update status report from the internal auditor.
Thank you, sir.
Martha,
That'd be
it's
me.
your turn.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for attending our meeting. I greatly appreciate it, Ms. Convoy, Ms. Fox. And thank you very much for being here. There's a couple of things that I would like to go over. I did hand out this thing that I handed out has to do with the update. The amazing thing about the annual audit plan is that I provided in advance, usually a year to a year and a half in advance, mainly to try to let everybody know where I'm going, where I'm headed. One of the things that happened this particular year was a little bit unique because I provided it back in February of this year. And unfortunately, there's been quite a bit of changes. The biggest change being the one with the EDI audit. And that consumed quite a bit of time. And after the comments that I received, not from the public, not from the audit committee, mostly from management, it had to do with, there were some things that were not in depth enough. They were not here, they were not there. So I would like to kind of address that. And that's because in that particular audit, it was one department that touched several other departments. Whenever it comes to the point of actually doing an audit, I don't just take somebody's word that tells me this is what happened. I go into a little bit more depth and find out, well, who else was involved? I need to verify who else was involved. Once I know who else was involved, then I go to that particular source and I ask them that question. So that's how I ended up with an additional 5 different departments in that particular audit. And it was, again, trying to do my due diligence. I had nothing to do with trying to prosecute a department or going after them in any way. It's still very much related to the EDI audit. It just had to be dealt with because it involved other departments. Nonetheless, the issue still stemmed from the EDI audit, so therefore it will continue. With that being said, because of that feedback that I received, and it's in the management responses, you guys could see it. It's very much there where I said, well, this didn't go deep enough and it didn't provide this kind of value. The point of it was to do a high level audit where it shows the department where they could improve. So if it wasn't an added value to management, then, you know, they maybe should have been in the exit meeting. That's where the value was. And that was where the agreement occurred. With that being said, because of that, I went ahead and revamped my annual plan. So you have the updated section. I know that you can't really read much of it, but most of this has to do for the audit committee. It was sent email to them, so that way they could see what has been updated. There was a list, a little section there in the middle, that you could see what was updated, what existed, and what is being updated to. And that way you can actually, oh, thank you. You're very welcome. You could actually see that what happened is that I used to have workman's comp, I had contractor vendors, I had engineer department, I had pay changes and connections and quite a bit of other stuff. Instead, what has happened, because of the findings of the EDI, I have gone ahead and added quite a bit of other departments, and that would be student relations department, social emotional learning department, the language acquisition department, the dropout prevention, alternative education, credit recovery, curriculum department, you name it, they're pretty much there. And that is because some of those issues from the EDI stem from those particular departments, or actually it drove me to actually see areas where, yes, the EDI might have some issues, but you know what? It's not them, or part of it is them, but a lot of what they end up dealing with is catching what all these other departments should in reality be cooperatively cooperating with them. How's that? In order to be able to get the things and the support that the students really need. So that's where that change has stemmed from. This was provided back in September 13th of this year. And so far have not received any feedback from anybody stating that, hey, you know what, we would want to add this or don't add that, or any questions whatsoever. So usually what happens with that is that if I don't hear anything, I just proceed.
What is the
Yes.
full distribution list for you when you give out your audit information?
I give it to the governing board when it's a final report. I give it to the audit committee. I give it to the superintendent. I give it to the staff. And that's pretty much where it stops.
So that would be just approximately, would that be a distribution of what, 300 people?
No. There's the 5 governing board members, the audit committee, which is the group here.
And then when you say staff,
Oh, that's Dr. Trujillo's support staff. That's
Oh,
what he
okay.
requested that I share it with.
okay,
So that's where it's at.
all
So
right,
yeah, and then where it gets disseminated from there, it's
right.
whomever decides to give it, that's whoever shares it. So with that being said, there is one thing that I want to go ahead and share with you is that, again, this report gets, or this plan gets distributed to the superintendent. And I don't know who he shares it with, but I do know that I provided in order for him to go ahead and share it with whomever else is going to be present or not present, or in basically the audit plan. One of the issues that I'm having right now is that fire and safety. That fire and safety I kept there because it has been there for almost 2 years. And when I sent out my letter of intent to audit, I was told, nope, we're not available because we have vacation here, we have breaks over there, and we're just not. Okay, so we negotiated a little bit, and now it's supposed to be starting on November 7th. That's a whole month between the time that I actually had it scheduled and now. And that wouldn't be much of an issue, except that it didn't stop there. And now he's coming back and saying, well, you know, because now we have this other external consultant, there's a lot of overlap. Maybe, you know, I want to know what it is that you're going to be looking at. I want to know what it is that you're going to be doing. I want to know specifics about this. And while I don't have an issue with providing that, I tend to agree a little bit with the fact that, yeah, there might be some overlapping because there is supposed to be a proposal that got approved, I believe, 2 weeks or not this last meeting, but the meeting before that, for school safety to have an external consultant come and review overall the security of school safety. In the past, when something like this has happened, there has been two options. I have the option to either reschedule it and wait until that particular external consultation takes place, or I could go ahead and downgrade it to a review. The difference between an actual audit and a review is the review is very much at a high level. And what it is that I meet with management and go ahead and say, hey, this is what I was going to be looking at. I feel that it's important enough that we should review it, we should sit down, we should look at and see what you're going to be doing, because odds are that the external consultant is going to find them anyway. So at least you'll have something in place by the time that they do come around. You'll be able to say, hey, by the way, we already know about this. We already addressed it. This is what we're planning on doing. So that's option number one. Option number two would be, like I said, postpone it and then just delay it further. The problem that I have with delaying something is that I'm not going to be going to the schools themselves, because the schools actually have a very, very comprehensive fire drill and processes and procedures. I already kind of reviewed them when I did the school safety. I'm more concerned about, and I know this is going to be a little bit odd, but I'm more concerned about the administration office at the school themselves, at the buildings themselves, because what I've noticed is that on the times that we have had a fire drill, I've been here for almost 5 years and I've only had a fire drill twice. Yeah, during that time, what I noticed is that people were pretty much walking wherever. There wasn't really any coordination. There wasn't anybody counting anybody. There wasn't anything like that. So that's where this one stemmed from. So while it is important to go ahead and have that external consultation, there seems to be also a delay on that. So what I would like to do is to have the audit committee to kind of give me any thoughts, any inputs as far as what and how to proceed, because school safety, in my opinion, is very essential, obviously, in schools, but it's also essential for the employees that we have in every individual office. And there doesn't seem to be proper processes nor procedures that are being followed. So what I would like to pose to you guys is to let me know, what is your advice as far as, I know what I would do, but I still want your advice. I don't want to just take it upon myself and tell you, hey, by the way, this is what I'm doing, which I'd rather have you guys tell me, since it just happened a couple of days ago.
Well, in this case, I'd start with the comment that we're not supposed to be sitting here in this building sometime in the first quarter of next year, correct?
I do not know that.
Yolanda, have you heard something, or anybody else? I mean, you going to the high rise? Second quarter next year? I mean, you're going to the high rise, right?
I don't know, based on the information that I received on Monday, that particular thing seems to be on pause as well. So I don't know.
Well, then we gotta ask Ricky.
So all I can tell you, because these conversations I've had in executive session, so I can't give you all the detail, is that it's still moving forward.
Okay,
So the process to still purchase the new buildings, sell this one, is still an ongoing process. So
do you believe, based on what you know and either can share or can't share, you will not be here by the end of 2025 in this building?
that we will not be here by the end of 2025. I can say right now that, yeah, we do not expect to be here by the end of next month.
Okay.
I'll make it easy on you though. My audits do not take that long.
I was only suggesting, rather than you duplicating your work, you wait until they are in that new building and then go through, quote, the drill.
And I think that that's a great suggestion and I appreciate it. The thing is that it's not just limited to here. It's also at the schools, but it's at the administration section, at the actual office managers with
Okay.
those individuals, because obviously I'm not going to go to all 89 schools, but it will be just like a random selection. And I'll go ahead and find out what is their processes, what is their procedures, how often do they have the drills? Because I know that the schools have the drills. It's just that the administration section, there's still humans there
Mhm.
that have fire safety that should be implementing and following these processes. The only reason why I didn't remove that particular fire and safety and jumped right into the student relations department is because I'm always very much conscientious as far as the time that I give people advance notice. Any thoughts?
Any other comments?
Move forward? All right. And sir, with that high note, I yield the time back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So then we postponed, and maybe we can have a brief discussion and see where we're headed on possibly giving the support to Martha of a full or part-time assistant to accelerate and or expand audit activities. Does anybody care to open that discussion up today?
Well,
John?
I looked at the benchmark that was provided by the Greater, always get their name on. Council of Great City Schools. This is from 2017. And for a school district our size, 42,000 students, you need 3.3 internal auditors if you just meet their average.
Okay,
I think we need more staffing. And so, yeah, let's start with that. And then let's start looking at adding a couple more full-time auditors. Let's have a team.
and in your experience, how much for a reasonable way to handle it, what kind of timeframes do we need to give the district itself and the board to kind of quote, here our recommendation, and then move it quote through the system?
I have no experience with that.
Bernie, what do you think?
Well, I would say right now that if we were to start planning in this regard, we might be able to have an ability to recommend insertion into the next fiscal year's budget. Absent that, I don't know how this ever gets necessarily done outside the scope of a budgetary authorization that follows the normal process of budget establishment. So to that end, I'd say right now that, you know, the clock's ticking. In the time that we've had this function in place of the district, it has had varying levels of degree of operation. And both Martha and Martha's predecessor have done remarkable jobs in the work that they've done, given the immense volume that's there to do. Doesn't mean that additional resources wouldn't be effective, but pretty effective as it is. So I would say, putting that all in a bow, is that if we have some interest in trying to augment the resources of the department, we need to be agendizing that in future meetings in a very specific way.
Okay,
But, you know,
I think
ways
that's
of
a
being
good
able to
comment.
identify, you know, what, you know, we've never as a body have had an input, a process to have a budgetary authorization. So we need to understand that process. Then we need to understand necessarily what that request would amount to. And then lastly is to make the request. and through what,
Mhm.
what path that would be.
Was there ever any attempt in prior years to add assistants and or additional personnel to the audit department?
No, as far as I ever know, in the time I've been here, the position has been in place, therefore the budget, I presume, certainly was in place.
Mhm.
Where that fits within, the, you know, the budgetary authorization mechanism, not sure. Even when the position was vacant, I don't know that the budget was necessarily vacated.
Hmm.
So that it was just an unfulfilled FTE. And of course, the functionality was unfulfilled. But then we went on to fulfill the position. And I suspect, you know, I'd have to go back to that time to see what process we went through to determine that the budget authority was there. If that was at all necessary in order to make the placement. I suspect that the placement wouldn't have occurred, it couldn't have gotten through HR if the budget authority wasn't there. Can make a placement, can make a hire if the position isn't authorized. So I don't know that that was a decision of, a part of the decision making of the body, of this body, when we went through the search process. And then-
Yeah, why don't you take us through just then we'll have a reference point, the genesis of and process you went through in the search process. You're the one we gotta rely on. What happened?
Let me preface this with the process was conducted in executive session. So I will
Okay,
be limited as to how I express this, but I'll try to express it, I think, in the generalities of how a process works. Which is to say that HR posted the position. There were
at your not at the audit committee's request, at the board's request?
I'm not clear on that. I don't recall necessarily where the request for placement occurred.
Okay,
You know, this is 5-6 years ago,
okay,
you know, and so to that end, I suspect it was that it was that it that it was through whatever necessary authorization would have occurred at the time. And given that the position is a reportee to the board, that I suspect that the board is the hiring unit. I suspect they were the ones that placed the request for placement to HR. Possibly with the assistance of, and then the practical side of that through, say, the superintendent's office, serving as a functionality of the board, but not one to do the placement, would be my guess. But then ultimately, we had applicants that we then vetted in a two-dimensional sense, in that we just looked at their credentials, their data, determined whether or not we would go forward with interview. Conducted those, and these again were executive sessions. Then led to necessarily then a decision to recommend to the board placement.
and
I don't know that that would be necessary with this kind of position,
mhm.
it being a support level. You know, that's not quite what Con talked to, is that there would also be possibly additional professional staff that we would then seemingly be involved with in the same way that we have been in the past.
I mean, I would suggest a set of steps, an assistant, another professional, and put it all in one, let's plan this out for 2 years.
But that speaks to is that we've got, that's why I suggest that we get very much more specific with our agenda item going forward and have this as effectively work session
Okay,
for,
or create a
Numerous.
subcommittee?
but I mean, that you know, the subcommittee could necessarily move faster. But so could this committee.
What if we asked Martha to draw up in a perfect world what she would like to see and then take her through that drill and see where that takes us?
But that's my point about agendizing that specifically. In other words, not make it as, you know, make this set, subject more specific in that regard.
Mhm.
And then certainly, I mean, there's no clarity to me as to necessarily who is in charge
Right,
of the unit
right.
that way. So, but I would presume that you can certainly say that it's Martha, and as such, she could necessarily make a proposal. This is what certainly would happen, with anybody who would make a proposal to their direct report, to that which they directly report to. And that's not us, that would be support, but present and say to us, if you want to get it vetted before going to. And I certainly see that be the case. If you wanted to do that. If we would be not the facilitator of the process, but rather Martha, and then we would be the ones to opine.
Right. John, with you having referenced that, what are your thoughts then?
Yeah, I think we could come up with a tactical plan for the next 36 months for the internal audit department to increase the staff to at least 3 professional auditors and an administrative person. I like 36-month tactical plans. That's one of my.
Okay. So as a first step, why don't you think about this discussion? And we put on the agenda for next month, what your preliminary thoughts are to think about that addition, if you are in support of the discussion we just had.
I'm in support of the discussion. There are other underlining issues that I believe that are essential to take care of before we even take that step, given the last incidents that we've had. I think that it's essential to understand what it is that internal audit is supposed to do, what it reports to, and how many people could go ahead and undermine it or decide to impede whatever process I have. I think that we need to take care of that first before we go. I could still work as part of it. However, I am not comfortable with proceeding until I actually, number one, I had it in my agenda to go ahead and address a little bit about the executive meeting. If I cannot even speak with my own supervisors, I think that we have other issues that need to be addressed before we could go ahead and proceed and getting other people to come into a toxic area.
So what would we call that in the world of audits and this kind of procedure? Will we call it a set of protocols? That we would.
I think the chain is getting a new audit committee charter done.
That's going to
The
occur.
second one is getting a new charter for the internal audit function
Right.
done. And then getting the budgeting over the next 3 years to expand that internal audit function per the new internal audit charter. And that's the chain of
Okay.
events. And we can be working on all those at the
I
same
think so.
time.
I agree with that, and I just think that it's essential that we don't start jumping ahead on something when we don't have our fundamentals or the basics. in place.
We have to have the entity level controls in place to
Absolutely.
define clearly what the responsibilities of the audit committee are and what the responsibilities of your audit function are. And that can be done over the next.
is everybody in alignment with that? Ray, I presume you're there. Do you have any comments?
Still can't.
No.
He's having microphone issues, so
Oh,
he
okay,
can hear us, but he can't.
all right. Bernie, Jericho,
Well, can't this just be worked on concurrently? And you
Yes.
present like a needs assessment?
Yeah.
To actually make it more concrete, even looking into what job duties this role is gonna take on, you know, if we're not looking at another auditor. Like, is it more clerical assistance that you need, or is it someone that does need more of a, you know, audit background? I don't know if you guys use Frontline, sometimes they have, just sample of job duties. And I know a lot of districts use that as a resource, but,
Right.
it's just something that's bringing it a little bit more concrete rather than, I'd like some help with what
Okay.
exactly do you need that help with?
No, it was never that simplistic, but yeah, no, I appreciate the comment on that because you're right. And it's not really, I'm not seeking to have, I think that I've been able to manage and perform quite a bit of audits. I know that 64 doesn't sound a lot, but I'm just going to share just a little bit. During this whole process, there was an individual from Texas who happened to be the chief the chief executive auditor over there. And his comment to me was, you done 64 audits by yourself? That's impressive. And I understand that a lot of people cannot relate to that because I usually view it as like, well, that's just, you know, in my opinion, that's not a big deal, but it is. Okay, so as far as the kind of support, yeah, I've had that conversation. I have a very good idea of what it is that I'm looking for. I'm not necessarily looking for another auditor, mainly because, like I said, I wouldn't really want to have anybody in the situation that I find myself right now. Okay, it would be more of a clerical, more of an assistant, because I do spend a lot of time doing clerical things that personally I view it as, if you break down what I earn per hour, yeah, it's not a lot given the hours, but it would be more advantageous to have somebody to just be able to support me. Eventually, obviously, that position hopefully would grow into something more. But yes, I agree with you and I appreciate the feedback because you're right. It needs to be a little bit more specific and I could definitely do that. And I agree with you as well that it could be worked on simultaneously. So thank you.
So is it something we can put on maybe this month's agenda to do something a little bit more than just maybe
I think so. Yeah,
I
I'll provide
think we
you
could
something.
have it on the agenda regardless and either expand the discussion at the next agenda or not, depending upon some of the other developments in this meeting. You never
That
know.
works.
well, at least just to get the ball rolling and
Yes,
maybe in great world, everything works out, and then by the
Yes.
time budgets, you know, are coming into place for next year. We at least have that done.
I agree. Thank you.
Bernie, any final comment?
No, I agree with what I've heard. You know, I think that is a direction for us to go and try to either conclude on this or put better, that it's decided that it's, you know, that it, however we get to this point, that it's not needed. And the agenda item is concluded.
Good. Martha, any final comment?
No, sir, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So the next item, discussion regarding 6.7. Authorization to engage in an independent quality assurance review for the internal audit function from the previous governing board meeting held on 8/27/24. Yolanda, have there been any public updates at board meetings? Did anything occur at the board meeting, last night relative to that item? Was it on the agenda last night?
No, it wasn't.
Do, do you all, we're talking about, John, 4.03, which is the engage in independent quality assurance review for the internal audit function from the previous governing board meeting. Do you have any comments on that for the moment? Just kind of some shorthand comments.
Well, first is full disclosure. I do those for a fee. Okay,
Okay,
a $50,000 fee, God, I'd love to get that because the profit margin on it would be huge. Most school districts go to other school districts and do a co-op type approach
okay,
where they get the chief audit executive or senior auditor from another school district, maybe a two-person team to come in and do the review. And it's free except for the expenses. That's the best way to approach it. My concern is if we try to approach it now before we get in place a good audit committee charter and a good internal audit charter, it just adds more confusion. And it also confirms the inappropriate behavior of the superintendent to ask for it. He was completely inappropriate in asking for that. It was against all best practices, and it's a huge red flag.
now, do you say that, and I'm gonna ask the attorney who represents both the board and the superintendent to comment also. Do you say that, and I'm asking because I don't know, and I'd love both of your comments. Is the practice you talked about between schools, that normal,
That's normal.
typical?
Normal.
Do we find that, Rob, do we find that in Arizona, what he has just referenced?
We're the only district I know of in Arizona that has an internal auditor. So in Texas, I don't know what they did there. Most school districts had internal auditors in Texas, but the process of evaluation, that was not something that crossed the general counsel's radar there.
About 3 months ago, I had the head of internal audit, the CFO of a very large district in Houston in a class for a couple of days. And they were talking about their internal auditor was having a peer review. And it was a combination of some people from Dallas and some people from San Antonio. And they had nothing to do with it, but they were waiting for the results. And it was initiated by the chair of the audit committee.
Okay, well. How would we like to then close out this section? Postpone for future discussion, ask the board to postpone for future discussion till we offer them another opinion?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think you could make that in a form of a motion that maybe we could do that?
I moved that the process of acquiring an outside quality review be delayed until the internal audit, the audit committee and the internal audit department have new charters.
Mr. Ober, this is an information item, so there's no there's no action that can be taken on this item.
Okay.
Okay,
This is placed as a study
we
information.
cannot, we can't have a vote. Can we have a recommendation?
You can place it on the next agenda. That would probably be as an action item, but as of today, you cannot take any action on this.
Okay,
Rob,
I'm looking at your next item, which is the charter. And
yes,
if somebody may think about a way to work that into your charter recommendation.
You mean, make,
So you have the charter coming up. If you're
Right.
going to make, if you're going to take a vote on a charter, you may be able to work this concept into your recommendation on the charter as well. That's what I'm saying that,
okay,
but not the current item is Yolanda.
all right. John, you go along with that? All right. Other members and comments, okay. All righty. So we'll leave that topic, Yolanda, at your direction. Then the next one is what we're all focused on, section 501, audit committee charter updates. John?
I'm good with it.
And everybody, every other member have, any comments? In this case, John, I'm really am in a deferential position because I am not a professional auditor. I have total respect for you and the other members of the
And
committee.
I got the process started with the draft and they fine tuned it, and I go with what's there.
And so, Bernie, how about you and where we're at on that?
You know, I have a few housekeeping items, that I see, and I assume the proposed, charter is the one that has been drafted by, committee member Jane.
Mhm.
Then, you know, in the composition section, which spells out the size and complexion of the body, there's the committee members will be appointed term of 5 years, but then the remainder of the sentence says is that the term limits are 9 years. That used to be in the old charter that your appointment could be up to 5 years. So in other words, I'm not sure how you do an appointment and a reappointment when you have a term limit. Okay. So I think the language that was present in the past
Right.
would be appropriate here as well, and it just seems to be dropped. So that's the housekeeping.
Okay. Rob, what do you think of his comment?
Well, I guess the question is, do you or do you not want a term limit? 2 5-year terms? I mean, if the committee wants to propose to the board, there be term limits. So,
2 5-year terms is fine with me.
It's just that there's a housekeeping issue.
right,
there.
and then
You really only have one appointment term, it would seem,
Right.
in this, because I don't know how the board makes a second appointment or reappointment.
if they're 5-year terms, then there's one reappointment, if you're limiting it to 2 terms, right?
You're appointed and then once
the 5
you can
years
be
you get
reappointed.
reappointed, and then if
Yeah.
the will of the committee is to propose term limit, 2 terms or 10 years or however, then it can be, that 9 years could just be stricken and just say, maximum of 2 5-year terms.
Sure, whichever, however, but in the past, that language to get to the 9 years was that it had up to 5 years of an appointment period. And historically, we've had anywhere from 3 to 5 year appointments.
It was confusing at times, wasn't it?
Well, and the part I think that was, speaking for myself, I've always been confused as to whether or not I term out 9 years from the date of appointment or the date that my future appointment would extend to, because equally we say in here that your appointment terms go to August 31st of each appointment cycle. I'm not sure if it's each year or just cycle. So my 9 years is up prior to what would be August 31st. You know, would be, and any of us would be that way, it'd be part year into one half of fiscal year.
Hmm.
Or one audit committee. You know, maybe that's not that important to you, but at some point, you know, this kind of thing necessarily get wrapped around.
Might as well deal with it, you know? So in essence, you're good with one appointment with one reappointment? You're probably good with that?
Sure.
I know I am.
Sounds good.
Hey,
Hey. Is
I guess
that
it's
right?
working.
yes.
Yeah.
All right, Ray.
Okay.
Technology comes
All
through.
right. It comes through for you finally, Ray. Okay,
Technology is great when it works, but yeah, I think that'd be simple enough to do.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Ray.
I said I think it'd be simple enough just to have up. Let's see. I'll go back to this. Just say each committee member will be appointed to a term of 5 years and may be appointed to an additional terms. Period.
Rob?
Well, I thought the will was to have a term limit. If you don't, if you don't want any term limits, then that makes sense, but if you want to have term limits, then you would say one additional term or 2 additional terms. I don't know why you'd set yourself to
Wow.
15 years here, but
I'm good with term limits. I mean, I'll just say it out loud Ray, are you good with term limits of 10 years?
Yes, I'm fine. Let's vote.
Can you go?
Okay, so I think we've got a consensus there. Man, that sounds like a long time anyway. So any other comments, questions, changes relative to the charter? Bernie?
I've got additional ones. On the meeting process, there seems to be some redundancy on the how quorum gets obtained. There's in the second paragraph, there's the discussion of that that leads to how a quorum shall occur, but then it also is on the fourth paragraph. I'm not sure I understand why why it's stated twice, that if there's something that we're trying to make a point of, why there's a again, another statement about the quorum being established.
Right.
It's a quick question. Do you just want to remove?
Rob, since you must have read that, do you see any confusion in how that's written?
well, I can see that it's redundant, but there's the first section, the second paragraph there, talks about when you actually have a meeting, right? The fourth paragraph talks about how you get stuff done. So you could probably take that first sentence off, because if you have unless you have a quorum, you don't have a meeting to get any stuff done. So you've taken care of that in paragraph 2, so you could take that first sentence off paragraph 4. And I don't think you'd lose anything. I think the committee would still know what you need to pass an item, right?
Bernie, John, Erica? Ray?
I'm okay with that, and I would ask if Yolanda can keep track of these little nits that we're picking on, and then get something where we can get a final draft that we can vote on today. Does anybody have any other proposed changes?
Are, hearing none. Oh, you do, you have another one.
On the, in the external auditor section, item A of, meeting with the, auditors prior to the commencement of the annual audit to review the engagement letter. That seemingly has been a, hard thing to necessarily get in place prior to the audit. It doesn't necessarily lead to a delay in the start of the audit. And I'm thinking that maybe we want to come up with some other language that allows that maybe the audit can commence, but that we have some interaction with the auditors prior to some larger benchmark or milestone.
Okay, with your history, what do you suggest? Seriously?
Well, I'm not sure that I do know necessarily where there's that inflection point. But I'm thinking it could be something as late as perhaps a summer meeting, for which they've already begun interim work in April, May, June,
Okay,
and yet haven't necessarily done the audit. Haven't done, you know, in the old days, we'd say before field work would commence. But today, field work is not as defined as, because that used to be that you'd be on site.
right.
That process is not necessarily the case anymore. But there
Right.
still may be actually a milestone like that. And considering that we have the situation where we've got the general ledger open and being processed until August 31st of every year. That I think limit then their ability to commence the audit or the lion's share of it until post August 30th. That's perfect. My point about maybe a summer meeting to have a process, but not to hold them from the ability to commence sometime earlier,
Mhm.
when otherwise they would be commencing. They would be performing what we used to refer to as interim audit. Interim was in reference to that it was prior to year end. And they started doing, as an audit process, you could do certain things that that you could be testing internal controls, you could do numerous things prior to having data be finalized at year end. I think that might be a better means of this committee serving the function, as well as not necessarily being an impediment to the practical process of.
So how would you like to word that? Seriously, because intuitively, it feels like you're right. He nods his head, you're right. So, and I'm not sure where you are. So I, can you put that in the form of a sentence, Ray?
Well, you know, we have to remember, the audit committee does not approve the engagement letter. It says review it, which is pretty passive. So we could say, meet with the internal auditors to review the engagement letter.
But prior to the commencement of the audit, that's the.
And why is that? What good does that do to meet with them before the commencement of the audit?
That's precisely my point.
What purpose does that? No, what purpose does that serve if we're not going to approve the letter? We don't have a decision-making role in this. It strictly says review the letter.
So what if we just take out the part with the independent auditors, just meet prior to, so we're meeting prior to commencement of the annual audit to review the engagement letter. And if auditors are available, it'd be great, but most likely it's not. But we're at least meeting and reviewing that engagement letter.
The challenge with it is that they can't commence the audit. They can't do anything relative to that year's audit task until we would do this.
But when, the auditor from Hinesville and Beach was here, he said that he'd be able to send it earlier, like April. So
That,
we'd be able to.
yes, that certainly, because of that being in place, there's been that conversation. But the issue has been historically with when there's the transition, or the process to re-engage or to engage new auditors. That tends to push out, or that has to be done at such an earlier time in a fiscal year, so that the engagement letter could be in place at the same point, like he's talking about being available this next year. And historically, that's not been the case. That's about the time when the decision of engagement is occurring. But the termination of who that audit firm will be, or the re-engagement. In other words, it goes through that, the procurement process.
Well, how about one of those statements, if this, then that, or when this, that, you know, kind of written in there, so it isn't date specific? How would you word that, Bernie, or Derek, or John? When this, then that, kind of.
Yeah, I guess to some extent, what I was gonna necessarily try to deal with is to see if Ricky would have some idea of what would be a good timing there, so that it wouldn't hold up
Right,
the department's work,
totally agree
but
with you.
yet would necessarily still lead to our interaction with the auditors and understand, you know, that, although it does say review the engagement letter, the scope of that session really is also to understand the audit plan for that fiscal year, you know, so on. And so, again, I don't know what, you know, that.
I mean, it really, that review to an extent is tacit approval or not, right? Because if the external auditor presents you an audit plan with components that are questionable, disagreeable, something that is anything but a yes, in effect, it prevents me from signing off on it as management, right? I mean, so whether you call it a review or not, I mean, ultimately it stops the process in its heels, because the auditors will not engage in any work, even the field work that happens in the month of May, you know, which is generally when they start is in May for the current fiscal year that we're still in. They won't even move forward until we sign that off, but you know, you're the cart and I'm the horse, so I'm kind of waiting for you all.
Mhm.
So, I mean, really, with respect to what Derek was suggesting, what Christopher was mentioning is he's able to have that letter available earlier in the spring, probably in that March, April timeframe. That would allow you all enough time, now that you're meeting a bit more frequently, allow you enough time to review it, engage with him, discuss it, question it to the extent that it needs to be. So that if you have if there are issues, it gives enough time to resolve
Right.
those, but if there are issues, or not issues, then, you know, I can sign off on it at the end of that meeting and he's ready to rock and roll, right? But to the point that Bernie was making during the period of transition, so the contract with the auditors is 5 years, right? Generally, by the 4th year, we put out an RFP to think about, you know, the future, the next auditing,
Right.
in the 6th year, whatever that may be. If it continues to be the same firm, it's a moot issue, right? Because we just kind of continue the cycle. But if the evaluation process determines that it needs to be a different auditor, we're legally not allowed to engage that auditor until their contract starts on July 1. So that's what then causes that delay, right? The Auditor General reviews that contract. They don't allow us to engage with our auditor, our new one, until their contract starts. You essentially can't have these overlapping auditors. And that's not something that we control. That's something that the Auditor General controls because her office has to evaluate this contract. And it is absolutely comical. Because ultimately, they provide the boilerplate.
I've
for the
never said
contract.
that federal or state laws were logical.
No, I'm not saying logical, I'm saying comical. But the boilerplate for that language is provided by the Auditor General, that starts July 1 of X. So the prior auditor can continue if there needs to be overlap, the new auditor cannot, right? Like the new auditor can't start until July 1st. So that's where that kind of squirrely little piece happens, kind of like the if-then statement that you're talking about. It might be that in years where there's a selection of a new external auditor, you may have to do the engagement potentially in July. Because the issue that we had 2 years ago is we couldn't sign off on the engagement letter until you all met. You didn't meet until August. They couldn't start until September. And so then that pushed the whole thing further down when these guys are starting in the month of May. So how you resolve that, I mean, it's to an extent, it might be that in the transition year, you know.
Stick with this wording.
Deal with it as it
Transition year,
comes.
we know it's gonna be late.
We could also make sure that if in any RFP process, they provide a sample of the engagement letter that they would be providing. So that at least you have that language ahead of time during the evaluation process. So by the time
That's a
that the
good idea.
contract's approved, the questions are somewhat minimal, right? Like, they provided it as an exhibit as part of their response to the proposal. That's one way to kind of get ahead of it. It's still gonna be a little bit later, but at least by July 1, it's ready to kick off, right? Because you all have may not have resolved any issues or questions. Otherwise, in Mr. Blackshire's suggestion of, we just know that in those transition years, when you flip auditors, it's just gonna be what it is. We'll roll with it as best as we can.
You want to specifically refer to the transition year then? No. Okay. So we have a de facto acceptance that we're a little delayed in that quote transition year. Is that what we're saying?
Because the state,
Okay. And everybody's smart enough to be aware of that intuitively. I mean, seriously.
somebody has to store that knowledge and tell the audit committee about it.
Well, that's why we like guys like Bernie around. You know, he's got that knowledge. I mean that, Bernie.
Well, I appreciate that, but I mean, that was not, the issue we ran into 2 years ago was that all that led to a later issuance of financial statements for which there was a great deal of consternation. Well, there shouldn't be then, period. It is a inherent outcome of the transition. Unless that auditor can otherwise run double time and not have that occur. But, again, that's just, and that's what I was trying to lead up to, is that there was that kind of issue then. I don't think it's particularly important that we meet with them prior to the commencement of the audit. Just that phrase alone. I think it's important we meet with them at some critical juncture during the audit.
So why don't we,
But that
why
critical juncture is
don't
not.
we mark out
well-defined.
prior to the commitments of the annual audit? Say, meeting with the internal independent auditors to review the engagement letter. Just leave it with that.
I'm in your guys' hands on this.
And,
So
and the external auditor is going to want to do it before he starts the work. Because he
That I-
wants to make sure that Ricky can sign off because he wants to get paid.
there you go, that key line.
Well, that's the other part, right? Like we don't issue a purchase order without the engagement.
Right, he's not gonna start.
And he won't start, I won't pay him until there's a purchase order.
Right, right.
So, yes, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
they wanna get paid.
So is that good with you, Bernie?
If it, yeah, if that necessarily is, practical.
Yeah.
I'm, not, again, it's the prior to the commencement that has been the Achilles heel. Issue.
Ricky, you feel comfortable the way this has evolved, this word?
I mean, I think as long as, it's memorialized in the minutes, but I think that kind of orientation information, if you will, for future audit committee members is probably gonna be important to kind of create that expectation. It may not happen every time. Like I mentioned, if the RFP process determines that there isn't gonna be a change in the auditing in the external auditor, then it's just, we go on to the, to the next year.
Right.
Business as usual.
Right. Okay, well then, Ray, any final comment?
No, I think what John proposed is fine. Just meet with them to review the letter.
So how about a motion then?
I move that we accept this charter as changed today and send it on to the governing board.
Is there a second to that motion?
I second the motion.
Any discussion? Then let's have a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Vote yes is then unanimous to send it on. Super. Okay. We have a scheduled executive session meeting, which gives you the opportunity to leave the room.
And several others.
And you too, I think.
So
do you need me or no?
I don't think so.
anymore? No?
This is pretty legit what we're doing,
Oh, you're doing it right?
Did we solve the world's problems?
We saw,
That's what you did.
well, that's what we voted on, and you're in charge now to solve them.
Okay, I'll get right on.
Get right on it. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so then as an action item, I'd like to see if somebody'd like to make a motion to convey this person to the board to be approved.
Okay, because that's not what we do. We make a recommendation to the board
Okay.
Well,
to a point.
so that's kind of what I meant with that, which is why I didn't want to be too specific and be recorded. So your motion is what, Bernie?
I move to recommend the appointment of Nicole De Silva to become a committee member of the audit committee that we recommend, sorry. Let me start again. I move to recommend to the board the appointment of Nicole Da Silva to the audit committee.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
So we have a unanimous vote again. On to the next activity. Okay, we did that. Now, the audit committee chair and vice chair elections. It's been a year and it's time for a change, as they say, so, hopefully you've thought about whether you or anybody else on here would like to be the chair, and then after we elect the chair, we'll elect a vice chair. You're in this small group, you're free to nominate yourself and or somebody else. To give an example, Ray was kind enough to scare the bejesus out of me and nominate me last year, and I was lucky enough to be elected. This year, I am not going to be either the coming year, I'm not going to be either the chair or the vice chair. And so I would look for you all to talk about our chairmanship changes. Comments from the crew? Right?
Figured you'd return the favor and nominate Ray.
How about Ray?
Ray should be the chair.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the best ideas I've heard. I would second that nomination. So, Ray, are you there? You didn't run away already, did you, Ray?
Let's vote.
Does he have to be present?
We have a majority.
Now we know, Ray.
His microphone went off.
Oh,
What time?
seriously, Ray?
Yeah. I told you his mic went off.
Is his mic off?
Yes.
Here's
Mhm.
He has that time limit at 4, right?
4:30.
4:30.
Mhm.
Yeah, we're inside that time limit.
Yeah. Can he just be nominated, voted on, and then the
Yeah.
next time he's
Right. Oh, the railroad.
right?
the meeting.
Hmm? That's true. It did.
I think we
Right.
should nominate you for the vice chair.
There you go.
So Yolanda, where did he go, as they say?
He's on there, he must have either stepped away or.
Confusing.
A lot of things happen when you step away.
You know, that was well done, you know, he ran away from his mic. Oh. That's
And we
pretty
lost
good.
Mr. Val Romero too, right? He's gone.
Is Val hiding out now too?
So, but, well, looks like he logged off.
He's gone.
Okay. So. Is this kind of like the army where, you know, we just, he's in? He's on the committee and we have a vote, then he's in.
He's it.
You're voluntold, right?
Yeah.
Voluntold.
So I would, then. Was it you that nominated him?
Yes.
Ray's been nominated and it's been open long enough, and hearing no other nominations. All in favor of Ray, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous.
Of those voting. He's still at the meeting, but of those voted. There was one.
Oh, boy. This is great. So now the question becomes, seriously, John, you've been a troublemaker all year. And,
So I
so,
warned you that I'm a special needs kid.
yeah. And because of your venerated position as a troublemaker, I think you want to ask to be the vice chairman.
Let's wait another year. The wife and I just bought a house 3 weeks ago. And I'm buried. I have too many little fires going on. Give me about 6 months to settle down.
All right, you have to promise you're gonna attend meetings, so.
And I attend meetings, but I'm exhausted. And I don't want to get into something else right now. Let's wait another year.
All right, then, Derica, seriously, by the power invested in me, I'm really requesting that you request to be the vice chair, since you're sitting next to John, and you're less of a rookie than I was when I got involved in this, so you're fully capable of pulling this off.
Okay, I will accept.
Excellent.
All right, so then by unanimous consent,
Wait a second.
you
You
now
need a
have your
second.
vice chair.
You need a
Wait a
second.
Second.
All in favor?
I have a
Yeah,
mo-
Aye.
we have a motion too.
Have to have a motion. John, you have the motion, and then
I
Bernie
move.
will second.
And see, you understand my,
Jerica?
you understand, I can't do phonics. I'm a complete sight reader.
Jerica, Lau.
Loud. Okay. As a special needs kid, I nominate Derica Lout to be the vice chairman.
Bernie,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous vote.
Okay.
Super.
So we're done?
So you guys will take over at the next meeting. We'll finish this agenda. And then it'll be your opportunity to get to sit at the head of the table. I mean, fabulous. We'll have Ray here and you'll be right here. Oh, super. I think you'll enjoy it a lot and very honestly, and I mean this to both Ray and you. It's really been a pleasure working with Yolanda and Tanya. I mean, they're very helpful. And obviously I need a lot of help. So they fulfilled their role well. So thank you. Next on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the audit committee meeting, last meeting. Anybody have any comments, questions, or go right to approval?
Right to approve.
All right, John, you motion to
I move
approve?
we approve the minutes.
Second.
Any comments? Hearing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're all in. Number 9, just to clear the air there, standing item, complaints received via various avenues. Yolanda, just state it, what occurred, and how we're not gonna do it. Somebody complained and
There was an anonymous complaint that was submitted, and I believe Tanya forwarded it to the committee yesterday, so.
just wanted to make sure everybody knew it and we're playing by the rules. We're not running away from anything.
What was it?
It was a complaint about, I shouldn't even say, should I?
I've never proven in this part for you. Complaints?
You know, we, in my,
I mean-
in my time, we've had so few, and I'm not, you know, time I was chair, had any. That I'm not sure what the protocol is of process. And with respect to that one, you know, I'm not sure how that gets handled.
I mean, it was an anonymous complaint for a call to the audience comment. So what I can say to that is that because of open meeting law, we are not allowed to do anonymous complaints during call to the audience because we actually have a name for the record during the minutes, so we were not able to read it. But we were able to forward it to the committee members so they could see what that complaint was about. So that's all I can say on that part. I don't know about whether during this item it can be discussed openly or if it's just something that would be, I would probably have to check with Rob and.
Well, anybody that, you know, we can always bring it back up, you know. We can err on the part of less disclosure then, and if it's required, we can disclose. Okay, all right, great. Standing item, request for information. Request by audit committee, request for information. Yolanda, I'm not sure exactly what that one means.
That's if the audit committee wants to request information from staff to be presented at a future meeting, if you have questions
Okay.
about something.
Did we allow you out of the little hot box we tried to create about you thinking about adding people, or did we defer on that?
We're kind of addressing it in the next meeting.
Next meeting.
Okay, all right.
That was,
Could we get the chief information officer to come and present a summary of what he's done about cybersecurity and how much did the breach cost us?
Okay, good. Yeah, let's put that on the agenda. I think that's very reasonable.
Because we're about due for a recurrence.
Because the bad guys need cash flow or what?
No. The recidivism of ransomware attacks is about 65%.
Really?
And it's generally within the 2 years. We're coming up on the 2 years. So I want to know, how much do we spend fixing this last one? And what have we done so we don't have another one?
It's that high?
Oh,
Seriously?
yeah.
Wow,
It's terrifying.
terrifyingly high. All right, and then I have a comment for the next meeting, which requires input from all of you. And
For the
I,
next
I-
That would be for the next item.
You need to close this item, get on to the next.
oh,
item.
we're not done?
No, so the.
I have to
request for information
officially,
is-
he has to
He
make that up.
requested the information for,
Everybody approve that?
you don't have to approve it.
I don't have to, move. Okay.
No, so we're done with that item, so now you have to go to future item.
Okay, so now we'll go to the future agenda item, which I would hope you all would approve. As a result of the events of the recent past, as they affected the function of internal audit and the EDI audit, and the conflict that seemed to arise between the superintendent, us, the internal auditor, the board, and some extraordinary possible discussions there, I decided to not involve any of you, and I went to Rob and said, you know, I'd really like to stop this level of conflict. And I scheduled through Rob a meeting with the superintendent, brief meeting. And I said, could we get on the same page so that we're not looking at one another in some kind of a combative format. And so after kind of an up and back, superintendent agreed to attend our next meeting. And what I would request of you, and to follow, I guess, the right policy, I would like you guys to send your comments to Tanya/Yolanda. That I'll put them together in a little list, and this is what I said I'd do for them if you guys wanted to have the meeting. And say, okay, here's what their thoughts are and concerns are to maximize the productivity of you attending our meeting. And he's scheduled on his calendar to attend our next meeting pending your approval. And any input you might have for him to look at and consider for his presentation to us. I'm pretty excited he agreed to it. This literally just happened, today is Wednesday, how about Monday? So it just happened, and I think it'd be very positive. And he was very positive about the fact that the product that has historically come out of the audit department, he thought was very well done. And I asked him, and I'll give you the short version of the answer, what happened in the EDI audit that took it to another level? And for whatever reason.
Mr. Chair, this should be that agenda item. You're getting a little bit too far out of the.
Okay.
We're just gonna have this session with the superintendent, for which you can maybe make this as a preamble to that.
Okay, this is a preamble that,
But a preamble to the introduction of that agenda.
oh, okay. Okay,
But I mean, yeah, only,
No.
because again, you're getting into areas.
Less
that
is
wouldn't
better,
notice
you
put it on
you
this
know.
agenda.
Just like an architect, less is more. So I'm excited for him to come to the meeting. I'm excited for you all to give input to Tanya/Yolanda. I'll kind of look at a list and then give it to him. And then he'll have a presentation where to us, and we'll have some discussion. And I think it was really positive, and he was very happy to come. So,
Good stuff.
and I'm looking forward to it personally. So do I still have the power vested in me to terminate this meeting?
Yes,
All right, we're terminated. Thank
yeah,
you.
30 minutes late for class already.
Look at that.
You're good. You're good.
I'm getting pretty good in this termination time.
Too bad that it's your last one.
You know what?
You seconded.
That's okay.
Are you sure you're ready to step down?
Oh, yeah. I'm ready because I've already had some discussions.
He's upset.